My favorite definition of education, it comes from my undergraduate ed professor, and his name was Stephen Smith, many years ago as an undergraduate at Keene State College. And his definition of education was to get students to unlearn the irrelevant. The primary purpose of education is to get students to unlearn the irrelevant. I love that. Now, if that's true, however, the corollary question is, what are we trying to get them to unlearn? And for me, it whittles down to what I refer to as the three cultural myths. The first myth is that what other people think of you matters. The second myth is that what you think of others doesn't. And the third myth is that one person cannot make a difference. What others think of you matters, but it doesn't. What you think of others doesn't matter, but it does. And that one person cannot make a difference, but of course they can. I think the first myth maybe is illustrated in a presentation that I do for my first year course students. And I do a presentation on the breathing mechanism and how the body works and all this stuff, the diaphragm. And I eventually get to a point where I say, okay, then why is it that when you breathe, you tend to move your shoulders, many of you, when in fact there's no muscles that connect the shoulders to the breathing mechanism? Why is that? And I tell them it's because a very well-intentioned kindergarten teacher told them at age 5, today you're going to take a deep breath. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And your 5-year-old brain says, big breath, big body. And there go the shoulders. So, kindergarten, first grade, take a deep breath. Second grade, take a deep breath. Third grade, fourth grade, take a deep breath. Fifth grade, take a deep breath. Sixth grade, take a deep breath. Seventh grade, take a deep breath. Right? Eighth grade, it's even worse. Eighth grade, take a deep breath. You're avoiding eye contact. You want nothing to do with anyone. And I tell my students that the reason for their change in behavior is because somewhere along the line, prior to getting to my classroom, they somehow learned to become self-conscious. And it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. And we have to be diligent about getting them to unlearn that. I've seen so many students paralyzed in my classroom, and so have you, paralyzed with fear over what are people going to say or think about me when I say or do things. We have to be making sure we're unlearning that for every kid at every grade level. The second myth, I had a student of mine walk up to me at York High School some years back, just walked up to me in the hallway. We'll call him Joe. Joe walks up to me and he says, you know what this world needs? What's that, Joe? This world needs unconditional love. And he kept walking. And so my first reaction was to stand there and say, well, I giggled, like that was random, you know. My second reaction was to say to myself, you know what? Game on, dude. You nailed it. Here's a young man so concerned about the condition and the shape of the world that he thinks what it's missing, accurately so, is a whole lot of unconditional love. Now, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear that he said something that wonderful and profound, because we know wonderful things and profound things come from our students all the time. What might surprise you is that he told that to me 15 years ago, prior to Facebook, prior to Instagram. If Joe felt that way about the condition of the world 15 years now, how in the world is he feeling about it today after the advent of social media? We have to be exemplifying, portraying, implementing unconditional love in everything we do. We have to, our kids have to get that from us, because here's what's going to happen. If they get it from us, they're going to stop looking at that's what that person said or that's what that person did, and they're going to start looking at that's who that person is. And here's the great thing about unconditional love. Every person is worthy of love. Every person is worthy of being valued. And you know what the best thing about the unconditional love is? It breeds empathy. And how many times have we already heard that today? And if we're not teaching that to our kids, what in the world are we doing with them? The third cultural myth. I have a poster hanging up in my office of a puppet maker. And I put it there intentionally so my students will ask me all the time about it. And when they do, I tell them the story of this person. He started his career in the late 40s or so and wasn't terribly successful. He made a living with it. He did his thing, but really never really saw through what he was going after. And about 20 years into his career, he cut a deal to have his puppets featured on a brand new television show called Sesame Street. And 10 years after that, they made a major motion picture featuring his Muppets. Well, 10 minutes into the Muppet movie, there's Kermit sitting on a log, and he was just told by a Hollywood producer, if you go to Hollywood, you could make millions of people happy. And Kermit sits there repeating that, millions of people happy. And I love that. It's one of my favorite moments of all the movies I have ever seen. And it's not because Kermit said it. It's because in the moment he's saying that, Jim Henson, as the voice of Kermit, is realizing his dream in real time as he's saying it. And I love sharing that story with all my students. But you know what I also tell them? If he only made a few people happy along the way, would you still consider him a success? You bet you would. And that's what we have to be turning our kids onto. What dreams do they have? What can we ignite our kids onto? What are they waiting for to come into their lives that they can latch onto and say, that's a piece of me? And they can run with it and they can take it and they can make a difference in the world. I think we are called as educators to make that an agenda item in all that we do with our kids. So today's topic, of course, is what's the pressing topic in education confronting us today? Well, for me, hands down, it's the social and emotional well-being of our students. And it's not even close. And so many of you have talked today far more eloquently than I could about that crisis and about the need. This morning's New York Times has an article on it. It's the pressing concept of our day that we have to go after, and if we don't, we're going to be paying for it for generations. Well, what are the three cultural myths about? The addressing of the three cultural myths and the unlearning of them is not the problem. They're the solution. And I might be wrong in saying that, but I would love to unleash those unlearnings and the undoing of those unlearning the irrelevance on the world and just wait and see what happens. Thank you.